With the release of Luca, we now have our 24th Pixar movie, so today I'm going to be ranking all 24 Pixar movies, tier list style. Starting off the list is Finding Dory. I'm actually going to put Finding Dory in the meh tier. At first, it's a very sad movie. The opening scene is very sad, and we learn to like the characters of Marlin and Nemo. And then Dory comes along, and she's obviously the comedic relief, and she's pretty funny. I like all of those three as characters in this film. But then, as it keeps moving along, and Nemo gets to this dentist and meets these other fish, I start to like it less and less. It's just really okay after that. The beginning, I really like, but then after that, it kind of just falls flat. The humor isn't as good then. Dory is funny the whole way through, but the rest of it, not the greatest. And I don't like the characters that he meets in the fish tank. And then the dentist girl comes in and she's just weird, and this movie just lands in the okay tier because it is just an okay movie. Then we have Toy Story 4. I think Toy Story 4 is going into the great tier. I watched it in theaters when it first came out in this huge grand theater, and that was a great viewing experience. And the movie did not let me down. The trailers I thought looked kind of good. I wasn't on board with Forky as the first, and I wasn't on board with Bo Peep coming back. But then the movie, it exceeded expectations for me. I think not quite the saddest movie in the franchise, but a very sad Toy Story movie. Obviously, the characters are all great, and I absolutely love the two new characters played by Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key. I love Keegan-Michael Key as an actor. He's very funny, and those two characters were just a great addition to the Toy Story franchise, and Toy Story 4 is just an overall great movie. Next up is The Incredibles. The Incredibles is also going into the great tier. It's just a really great superhero movie, and it's not DC, it's not Marvel. It's from the people that made films like Monsters, Inc., films like Finding Nemo, and films like Toy Story. They made a superhero movie that is great. I used to find this movie boring. I don't anymore. I think it's very entertaining. And all of the characters, all of us have come to love. Mr. Incredible, iconic. Dash, Violet, Elastigirl, and the baby are all iconic characters, and I love them all. They're all great. And I think this movie as a whole is great. The animation from the mid-2000s is very good, and The Incredibles is landing in the great tier. Next up is Monsters, Inc., and this is another unpopular opinion. It's going into the meh tier. Just like Finding Nemo, as it keeps moving along, I get less interested into the plot and the concept. The concept as a whole is very unique and original about how these monsters going through these doors to scare these kids. It is absolutely brilliant in my opinion. But then Boo comes in and there's Randy, and it's not the greatest. I think that it's just meh. The ending, honestly, underwhelming for me, but the rest of the movie is kind of good. But it is still landing in the meh tier because it's about on par with Finding Nemo, in my opinion. Then we have Cars 2, a very unpopular opinion for this list. It's going in the good tier. I just have a lot of fun with the movie, and I really, really enjoy it. Even though the fart jokes do not work at all, they don't land, they don't make me laugh, and putting a spy genre into this franchise, not a good idea at all. I think that they could have done a lot of things better, but this movie is just super fun. I think the acting, all great. The animation, all great. And it's just a fun time to watch. There are plot holes and there are a lot of unfunny jokes, but it's super fun and I have a great time with it. An even better time with the original Cars movie, which we're talking about right now. The next one is Cars. This one is also going in the good tier, but I do not like it as much as Cars 2. I think it is the weakest Cars movie in my opinion, and the one that is the least interesting and the one that doesn't grab my attention as much as the others. It's a fun concept, but having cars like talk and have eyes, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but it's just become so iconic that we all really like it. At least I know I do, and I've seen a lot of people that really love the movie Cars. Some people don't like it, some people do. It's a pretty divisive film, I think, but Cars, it's a good movie. I've always liked it. I've always been entertained by it, thoroughly enjoyed it. The concept doesn't make any sense, like I just said, but it's a cool concept for little kids. Little kids aren't going to ask these questions that don't have answers, but they're just going to have a good time with it like I did. The ending with the race, it's pretty high in stakes, and the acting from Owen Wilson and Larry the Cable Guy, it is amazing. Seriously, the acting, it's perfect for this movie, and the animation is once again great. Next, we have Monsters University. And this is actually going to go in the great tier. I think it's a great movie and better than the original Monsters, Inc. The concept, it's a college movie. That's the easiest thing you could do with this franchise, to learn how to scare and stuff and how this whole, corporation started. And I think that this is just a better movie. The soundtrack is phenomenal in this. I think that it has a better soundtrack than the first, even though the first has an amazing soundtrack. And the animation is gorgeous. The fur on some of the monsters just looks so good. And everything just works really well, in my opinion. It's one of the funniest Pixar movies. It's one of the best looking Pixar movies. And it is one of the best Pixar movies, in my opinion. Next, we have Toy Story. And that's also going to go in the great tier. I might change it later on to go in the good. It's kind of mixed right now. I don't know whether I should put it in the good or the great. But it started Pixar, and what a great studio it started. Pixar is amazing. It's a little overrated in my opinion, because some of the movies considered the best are not the best in my opinion. But Toy Story, it is definitely a very good film. Toy Story has some mediocre animation, but it was the first movie to be fully CGI. Fully CGI, there's no drawn animation like the films that came before. And for that, I think it looks really good. Sure, you can pick on it now for being a little bit touchy at spots, but it looks pretty good. And the voice acting performances are phenomenal. The characters are phenomenal. Woody and Buzz, such a great duo for this film. And I think that it is a great movie. I don't know if I should put it in the good. I might change it later on. But for now, it's going in the great. And then the next movie is Onward. This is also going in the great tier because I think it is one of the most underrated Pixar movies. A lot of people watched it and thought it was pretty okay when it first came out on Disney+. But I personally really loved it. Tom Holland and Chris Pratt in a Pixar movie? Yes, please. And I think it worked very well. The comedy and the chemistry between Tom Holland and Chris Pratt is so good. And then the concept of this movie is pretty good too. It is very sad at the end, like a lot of these films, but they just know how to mix the tones together so well, and I absolutely love the film. It's not going to go quite in the amazing tier, but it's pretty darn close, and it's going to go in the great tier. Next up is Toy Story 3, and this one, it's not going in the awful tier. It's going in the amazing tier. In my opinion, it's a masterpiece. One of my favorite films ever made. All of it is just so good. I enjoy every frame of the film. The animation, gorgeous like almost all of these. And the concept of them going to a daycare, Andy growing up and not using his toys anymore, it is very good for a Toy Story movie. I personally think this should have been how they ended this franchise of the Toy Story. We got another one, but that one's great, so it doesn't really matter. Toy Story 3, it's a masterpiece. The ending, super sad. I even cried when I was younger because I was so sad at the end when they just saw Andy driving away and Woody saying, "So long, partner." It's just such an amazing film with an amazing ending, and everything is just phenomenal in my opinion. Next up is Brave. This one's going in the meh tier. At first, I liked it, and then the next couple times I watched it, got a little bit less, and then I had to rewatch it, and it was pretty good. I mean, it's less than good, so it's gonna go in the meh tier, but probably close to the top of the meh tier. The animation, gorgeous. You'll be hearing me say that throughout this entire video, but it's just not something I feel like Pixar is the right studio to make. The concept about this girl that meets the witch and turns her mom into a bear, it could have some emotional moments and it has potential for a lot of sad moments, but I just don't think the sad moments work, and I don't think the comedy works that well. Some of it is kind of funny, but the rest of the film is very okay for me. Next up is WALL-E. WALL-E, it's gonna go into the bad tier. Some of you might think I'm joking right now. I'm not joking. WALL-E is, in my opinion, a bad movie. A lot of people love the visual storytelling it uses. I'm not a big fan of that. It has a pretty cute romance, and the animation is phenomenal. But the rest of the film just isn't up to par. It's just, very bad. I hate to say it for a Pixar movie, for how great of a studio Pixar is. I didn't like the character of WALL-E. I didn't like his friend, and the human characters, so bad. I did not like them, and this movie, I don't like it at all. Let's move on. Then we have Up. Up is going in the meh tier. The beginning, it's phenomenal. The beginning is one of the best scenes in all of Pixar, but then, as it keeps moving along, I've said this for other films, it just gets less and less and less good. The twist villain, I don't know what to say about it. It's honestly right as good as the Iron Man 3 twist villain. It's weird comparison, but I like them about the same. It's okay, just doesn't make any sense at all why that guy would be there and why that guy would be so evil. There were some exciting moments at the end, but overall it's just not very good and going in the meh tier. A lot of people love it. I just can't agree with them. And it's going into the meh tier. Next up is Coco. I'm contemplating of whether I should put it in the great or the good. I might change it later on, but I think right now I'm gonna put it in the good. It is a very visually appealing film, and a lot of it, just by the poster, you can see how much time and effort they put into the animation. And a lot of the characters are very emotional, and this movie can be emotional, and the characters can also be funny. The music is great, but not a film I really want to rewatch all that often. It's kind of just a one-time viewing, and then after, I would watch it again, but I don't really want to, and there's nothing calling me back to the film that's super special and different from the other movies in this list. I think the twist villain, saw it from a mile away, but it's okay. I mean, of course they would do that. It's very generic twist villain, but it's fine. And the rest of the movie, it's pretty good. I think I had a good time with it, but that's pretty much all I got to say about it. Next up is Finding Dory. That's going to go in the good tier as well. The Finding Dory is a film that gets way too much hate in my opinion. I've always had a great time with it, always thought that it was a hilarious movie. I I know a lot of people think that the character Dory is unlikable and just not funny, but I think that she's hilarious, and I think that Ellen DeGeneres plays her amazingly. And there are a lot of sad and cute moments in this movie that I really loved, and Finding Dory is going in the good tier. Once again, could change. I'm going to have to edit this list later on. But this is where it's going right now, and it is a good movie. I saw it in theaters. I loved it. Back then, whenever I saw a new movie in theaters, it was my favorite movie. Not even close to my favorite movie now. Not even in my top 100. But it's still a pretty good time and a good movie overall. Next is Incredibles 2. I'm going to put this in the great tier. I think that it's a little bit better than the original Incredibles. You can say all that you want to me, but I just had a better time with it. It's more visually appealing, and I actually like the Screenslaver better than Syndrome. I think that Syndrome was a good villain. They just made him too quirky and kind of comedic sometimes, and I didn't really like that. The Screenslaver, it was a great villain, which made for some phenomenal action sequences. A lot of the action sequences, with the animation, blending them together, it just looks so good. And I think I might rewatch it again sometime. It's a very rewatchable film and lands in the great tier. Next up is Inside Out. That's as well going into the great tier. It's one of the best, easily. I love the concept. It's unique and everything looks amazing. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but all of these movies have great concepts and amazing animation. Everything looks so good. And when this movie is emotional, it is just so sad. I just love the movie, and it lands in the great tier. Next up is Toy Story 2. I think that's also going to go in the great tier. There's a lot of films in the great tier. Toy Story 2, I think, is a little bit better than the first Toy Story. The animation improved a lot, and the characters, I think, were improved and given even more layers of emotion and all of the stuff that these characters need to be likable. They added new characters, including, what's-her-name, Jessie. It's one of the most iconic characters in the franchise and easily one of the best. And she was introduced in this movie in a great way and gave her a good backstory and all of it. I just love all of the other movie references in it, especially the Star Wars one. And the movie is just great as a whole. Next up is Ratatouille. I think Ratatouille is going to go in the good tier. At first, when I first watched it, I wasn't the hugest fan. I thought it was one of my least favorite Pixar movies. And while it still is kind of close to the bottom, it's still a very good movie. Brad Bird is an amazing director. If you didn't know, he also directed the Incredibles movies, The Iron Giant, and Tomorrowland, and one of the Mission Impossible movies. I think he's a great director. I haven't seen the Mission Impossible movie he did, but from what I have seen, Brad Bird is a great director. In this movie, the rat that pulls on the man's hair to make him cook this amazing food, that's genius. I mean, it wouldn't happen in real life. It's very fiction, but it's super fun and a very enjoyable film and landing in the good tier. I just have a little bit of nitpicks about it, but it's still a good movie. Next up is The Good Dinosaur. I don't know whether I should put this in the good or the meh. Right now, I think I'm going to put it in the good. It might change later, but as of now, we're putting it in the good tier. I think that while it is one of the not rewatchable films in the Pixar studio, it is a very enjoyable film, and when there are emotional moments, Pixar does their job amazingly, hands down. When Pixar is emotional, super emotional. In The Good Dinosaur, it's a very emotional movie, and I really, really love the emotional moments. The rest of the film, however, is not quite as good and gets a little bit boring, in my opinion. I just didn't really connect with the characters, but it's still a fun time and landing in the good tier. Next up is Cars 3. It's going to go right where the other Cars movies went, in the good tier. Cars 3, it's a super forgettable movie, but when you're watching it, you just have a fun time and laugh at most of the jokes. There's fart jokes like in all of the Cars movies, but I think that Cars 3 is a pretty good movie. The characters are great. The new characters they introduced, pretty good. Cruise, not the hugest fan. I think that Cars 3 has a lot of amazing ideas. Sadly, they just didn't pull them off as well as we all hoped they would. But it's still a good movie, and I had a very good time with it. Next up is A Bug's Life. That's also going into the good tier. When I first watched it, it was one of my favorite Pixar movies. Not even close now, but it's still a very good movie. The animation, the dullest and the least colorful out of all of them, but it was made in the 90s, so what can I say? I cannot blame them. But the rest of the movie, and while the characters aren't the most memorable, it's exciting and there are some good comedic moments. It's just not one of the more memorable ones. Next up is Soul. I think Soul is actually gonna go at the good tier, probably the top of the good tier. When I first watched it, I really liked it, but now I'm just not as interested in it, and I don't really want to rewatch it. The concept is good. I didn't like the twist about how he went into the cat's body and what's-her-name went into Joe's body. Didn't like that. I think that it felt very forced. And the rest of it, I thought some of it was good. I wanted more time in the actual city rather than the Soul world, but what we got was still fine and going into the good tier. Next up is the new film Luca, and that's going to go in the great tier. Luca is just has some of the best animation in all of these movies. They use this style sort of like the Peanuts movie, and it looks super good. Some of it was predictable, but the way that they made these people go into the water and turn into these sea monsters, and then they come out and they turn into humans, it just looks so good, and everything looks gorgeous, and it's colorful. The acting, some of the best in this franchise, in my opinion, especially coming from these child actors. Jacob Tremblay, who is a great actor who played the main lead in Wonder, and then Jack Dylan Grazer did a great job with his character in this movie, and I really enjoyed Luca as a whole. Now that I've talked about all of the movies, I'm going to rank them, and you can see that full ranking in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that is the ranking. The top is the best and the bottom is the worst. You can go down the line and see the ranking. The best is Toy Story 3, and the worst is WALL-E. I think that Toy Story 3 is an amazing movie, and I think that WALL-E is a bad movie. But that's it for this video, everybody. I hope you guys liked my first tier list video. If you want to see more of these, tell me down below in the comment section. But until then, stay tuned and subscribe to Cinema Ranks.